Today, I'll share with you a powerful story of betrayal, forgiveness, and unexpected revelations. This tale follows Beverly, a 74-year-old widow who discovers her daughter has sold her late husband's cherished Rolex watch, the only physical memento she had left of him. What begins as heartbreak evolves into a journey of shocking discoveries that will change everything Beverly thought she knew about her marriage and family. Through this emotional journey, we'll explore how even when we feel most betrayed, life can reveal surprising truths that offer a different kind of healing. Before we begin this incredible story, don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and tell us in the comments where you're listening from. My name is Beverly Thornfield, and at 74 years old, I thought I had experienced every emotion life had to offer. I've weathered the storm of losing my husband, Montgomery, 3 years ago to a sudden heart attack, raised 2 children who grew into adults with lives of their own, and built a modest but comfortable life in our small Connecticut town. The house feels empty without Montgomery. For 49 years, we shared everything: meals, laughter, arguments, and silence. The kind of comfortable silence that only comes after decades together. His absence is a physical thing, like a piece of furniture that's been removed, leaving a conspicuous empty space that nothing else quite fits into. After Montgomery passed, I kept most of his belongings, not because I couldn't let go, but because they were tangible pieces of our life together. His reading glasses still rest on the nightstand. His favorite sweater hangs in the closet. And his Rolex watch, his prized possession, given to him by his father, I kept in the small jewelry box on my dresser. Montgomery wasn't a materialistic man. In fact, the watch was the only luxury item he ever owned. He wore it every day for 40 years, taking it off only to shower and sleep. The watch witnessed our entire marriage. When I looked at it, I could almost hear the ticking marking the seconds of our life together. That Tuesday morning in April was unusually chilly. I had invited my daughter, Penelope, for lunch. At 45, Penny was my youngest, always the spirited one, always reaching for more than she had. While my son Theodore had settled into a stable life with his wife in Oregon, Penny was still finding herself, as she put it. A series of failed relationships, career changes, and financial difficulties had left her living in an apartment she could barely afford, working a job she complained about incessantly. I was in the kitchen preparing her favorite chicken salad when I had a sudden urge to hold Montgomery's watch. It wasn't an uncommon feeling. Sometimes, I just needed to feel the weight of it in my palm, run my fingers over the face that had reflected his image for so many years. I went to my bedroom and opened the jewelry box, already reaching for the familiar shape, but my fingers found only empty space where the watch should have been. I frowned, thinking I must have moved it. I emptied the jewelry box item by item: my wedding ring, the pearl earrings Montgomery gave me on our 25th anniversary, the bracelet from my mother, but no watch. A knot of anxiety began forming in my stomach as I searched the entire bedroom. Drawers, closet shelves, even under the bed. Nothing. I moved to the bathroom, then the living room, my movements becoming more frantic with each passing minute. By the time the doorbell rang, announcing Penny's arrival, I was in a state of near panic. The watch couldn't be gone. It just couldn't. When I opened the door, Penny stood there with a new designer handbag and sunglasses perched on her head despite the cloudy day. She had her father's height and my chestnut hair, though hers was now highlighted with expensive blonde streaks. "Mom, you look terrible. What happened?" she asked, stepping inside and giving me a quick hug that smelled of expensive perfume. "Penny, I can't find Dad's watch. I've looked everywhere." A flicker of something, was it guilt, crossed her face before she composed herself. "Oh, that old thing. Maybe you misplaced it." "I would never misplace it," I insisted, hearing the desperation in my voice. "And I always keep it in my jewelry box. And now it's gone." Penny walked past me into the kitchen, setting her bag down on the counter. "Well, things get lost all the time, Mom, especially when you get older. You probably put it somewhere and forgot." The condescension in her voice stung, but I was too worried about the watch to address it. "I need to keep looking. Lunch might have to wait." "Mom, seriously, it's just a watch. Dad's gone. A watch won't bring him back." I stared at her, shocked by the callousness of her words. "It's not just a watch to me, Penny. It's a part of him." She rolled her eyes, a gesture so dismissive it momentarily took my breath away. Fine. I'll help you look. But then we need to eat. I have an appointment at 3. We searched the house for another half hour, with Penny putting in a half-hearted effort, checking the same spots I had already searched thoroughly. Finally, I sank onto the living room couch, a sense of loss washing over me. I don't understand. It was right there in my jewelry box last week when I polished it. Penny sat beside me, checking her phone as she spoke. Mom, maybe it's time to let go of some of Dad's things. It's been 3 years. I looked at her, really looked at her, and saw something in her expression I couldn't quite place. Penny, do you know something about the watch? She didn't meet my eyes. What would I know about it? You've been acting strange since I mentioned it was missing, and now you have a new bag that looks quite expensive. Penny's face hardened. Oh, what are you implying? That I stole Dad's watch, my own father's watch. I'm not implying anything. I'm asking you directly. Do you know where the watch is? Penny stood up suddenly, her face flushed with anger or guilt. I couldn't tell which. This is unbelievable. I come to have lunch with my mother, and I get accused of theft. I'm not accusing you, I said, though even I could hear the uncertainty in my voice. I just want to know where the watch is. For God's sake, Mom, she exploded. Stop whining. I sold it. I needed money for a trip to Bali with Stephen. The rent on my apartment went up, and I couldn't afford both. The room seemed to tilt around me. You sold your father's watch? Without asking me? Without even telling me? It was just sitting in a box. You weren't using it. She shot back defensively. And I'm going through a really difficult time right now. Stephen says this trip will help us reconnect. Stephen was her latest boyfriend, a man I'd met only twice but had heard countless complaints about. Their relationship seemed to consist primarily of expensive gifts and dramatic breakups. That watch was the most precious thing I had of your father's, I said, my voice surprisingly steady despite the trembling I felt inside. And how could you take it from me? Oh, please. It's not like Dad would care. He's dead. The moment the words left her mouth, I saw regret flash in her eyes, but it was too late. I stood up slowly, drawing myself to my full height, which still left me looking up at my tall daughter. Where did you sell it? She crossed her arms. Why does it matter? It's gone. Where, Penelope? Perhaps it was my use of her full name, or the tone that I hadn't used since she was a defiant teenager. But she relented. Fine. Garrison Pawn on Maple Street. But it's been almost a month. They've probably already sold it. A month. She had taken it a month ago, and I hadn't even noticed. The thought filled me with a fresh wave of guilt and pain. I think you should go, I said quietly. Mom, don't be dramatic. Let's just have lunch and please leave my house. My voice was firm, leaving no room for argument. Penny stared at me for a long moment before grabbing her bag. Fine. Call me when you've calmed down and gotten some perspective. She slammed the door behind her, leaving me standing alone in the middle of my living room. The house had never felt emptier than it did in that moment. I sank back onto the couch, my mind racing. I needed to get that watch back, no matter the cost. It was the last piece of Montgomery I had that felt truly significant, that had been with him every day, that had touched his skin, marked the time of our life together. With trembling hands, I reached for the phone and looked up Garrison Pawn Shop. The next morning, I drove to Garrison Pawn on Maple Street. It was a small shop wedged between a laundromat and a convenience store, with a faded sign and bars on the windows. Not the kind of place I would typically visit, but I was on a mission. A bell jingled as I pushed open the door. The interior was cramped but surprisingly neat, with glass display cases containing jewelry, electronics, and various collectibles. A bald man with thick glasses looked up from behind the counter. Good morning, ma'am. How can I help you? I approached the counter, suddenly feeling self-conscious about my age and the slight tremor in my hands. Good morning. I'm looking for a watch that was sold to you recently. A Rolex. It belonged to my late husband, and my daughter sold it without my permission. The man's expression softened slightly. I see. When was this sold to us? About a month ago, according to my daughter. Her name is Penelope Thornfield. He nodded and turned to a computer beside the register. Let me check our records. He typed for a moment, then frowned. Yes, we did purchase a Rolex from a Penelope Thornfield on March 18th. Submariner model, quite valuable. My heart leaped. Do you still have it? His frown deepened. I'm sorry, ma'am. It appears we sold it 2 weeks ago. The hope that had briefly blossomed withered as quickly. Oh, I see. I can give you the details of the sale if you'd like to try to contact the buyer, though I can't guarantee they'd be willing to sell it back. I nodded, trying to hide my disappointment. Yes, please. Any information would help. As he typed on his computer, the telephone on the counter rang. He gave me an apologetic look. Excuse me for one moment. He answered the phone. Garrison Pawn, this is Harold speaking. While he spoke on the phone, I gazed around the shop, wondering which case had held Montgomery's watch, how much Penny had received for it, if she had felt any remorse at all when handing over this precious piece of her father. Yes, we do have a Rolex Submariner that was recently sold, Harold was saying into the phone. He listened for a moment, his expression changing to one of surprise. Really? Inside the watch case? Another pause. Yes, the woman who sold it to us is actually related to... Yes, I understand. He glanced at me with new interest before returning to his conversation. Actually, the original owner's wife is here right now, inquiring about the watch. He listened again. I see. Yes, I'll tell her. Thank you for calling. He hung up the phone and looked at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. Mrs. Thornfield, that was the most remarkable coincidence. That was the gentleman who purchased your husband's watch calling. Oh, I felt a flicker of hope. Yes. And ma'am, he found something quite unusual. He said there appears to be a small safe deposit box code or number hidden inside the watch case. He was calling to see if we knew anything about it or could contact the original owner. I stared at him, confused. A code? Inside Montgomery's watch? Harold nodded. According to the buyer, there's a sequence of numbers and letters engraved on the inside of the case back. It looks like it might be a safe deposit box number and access code. He thought it might be important to the original owner. My mind raced. Montgomery had never mentioned anything about a safe deposit box, let alone a secret code hidden in his watch. In 49 years of marriage, wouldn't he have told me? Mrs. Thornfield, Harold continued. The buyer said he'd be willing to sell the watch back to you if you're interested. He mentioned he felt uncomfortable keeping something that might contain personal information. Yes, I said quickly. Yes, I'd like to buy it back, whatever the price. Harold wrote down the buyer's information, James Whitaker, along with a phone number. He said you can call him any time to arrange a meeting. I thanked Harold and left the shop in a daze, the piece of paper clutched in my hand. As I sat in my car, I stared at the name and number, wondering what secrets Montgomery had kept from me, and why. I called James Whitaker as soon as I got home. He answered on the second ring, his voice warm and courteous. Mrs. Thornfield, thank you for calling. I was hoping to hear from you. Mr. Whitaker, I understand you found something in my husband's watch. Yes, ma'am. When I was having it authenticated, the watchmaker opened the case and found what appears to be a code or number engraved on the inside. Given how deliberately it was placed, I thought it might be important. We arranged to meet at a coffee shop downtown that afternoon. While waiting for our meeting, I couldn't stop my mind from conjuring all sorts of scenarios. What could Montgomery have been hiding? A safe deposit box suggested something valuable or confidential, but why keep it secret from me, his wife of nearly 5 decades? The coffee shop was busy when I arrived, but I spotted James immediately, a distinguished man in his 60s with salt and pepper hair, sitting at a corner table with a small box in front of him. He stood as I approached. Mrs. Thornfield? James Whitaker? It's a pleasure to meet you, though I wish it were under different circumstances. I shook his hand. Thank you for contacting the pawn shop, Mr. Whitaker. You didn't have to do that. He gestured for me to sit. Please, call me James. And of course I did. When I realized what I had found, I knew it must be significant to the original owner. He pushed the small box toward me. Your husband's watch. I'm happy to return it to you. I opened the box, and there it was. Montgomery's Rolex, looking exactly as I remembered it. The sight of it brought tears to my eyes. How much do I owe you? I know these watches are valuable. James waved his hand dismissively. I paid $8,500 for it, but I'd be happy to return it for what the pawnshop gave your daughter, $6,000. I can absorb the loss. It was a generous offer, but I couldn't accept it. No, I insist on paying what you paid. You've been kind enough already. After a brief, polite argument, we settled on $8,000. I wrote him a check, which would significantly deplete my savings, but it was worth every penny. "Now," James said, taking a sip of his coffee, "about what I found." He picked up the watch and carefully opened the case back, revealing the inner workings. Then he pointed to a series of characters etched in tiny script around the edge. FNB 42785 MRT. "It looks like a safe deposit box number to me," James explained. "FNB likely stands for First National Bank. 42785 would be the box number E, and MRT might be a password or authentication code." I stared at the tiny engraving, feeling as though I was looking at a message from a stranger, not my husband of 49 years. "Montgomery never mentioned a safe deposit box to me." James looked sympathetic. "Sometimes people keep things separate for all sorts of reasons, Mrs. Thornfield. It doesn't necessarily mean anything concerning, but as I left the coffee shop, watch safely in my purse, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was about to discover something that would change everything I thought I knew about my marriage and the man I had loved for most of my life. The First National Bank was a 20-minute drive from my house. By the time I arrived, my hands were sweating on the steering wheel. Part of me wanted to turn around and go home, to put the watch back in my jewelry box and pretend I'd never learned about the secret code, but I knew I wouldn't be able to live with the mystery. The bank was busy, but I was directed to a young woman named Rachel at the safe deposit box desk. She smiled brightly as I approached. "Good afternoon. How can I help you today?" I took a deep breath. "I'd like to access a safe deposit box, please. My husband had one here, but he passed away 3 years ago." Her expression softened immediately. "I'm very sorry for your loss. Do you have the box number and key?" "I have the number, but not the key. I just discovered its existence today." I showed her the watch with the engraving. Rachel examined it carefully, then looked back at her computer. "The number matches one of our boxes, but this is unusual. Normally, you would need the physical key to access it. Since your husband has passed, we'll need to see his death certificate and your identification proving you're the spouse. Do you have those with you?" I didn't, so I had to return home to gather the necessary documents. The additional time only increased my anxiety about what I might find. What could be so important that Montgomery would keep it hidden from me all these years? When I returned to the bank with the required documents, Rachel reviewed everything carefully. "This all appears to be in order, Mrs. Thornfield. Since you don't have the key, we'll need to drill the lock, which requires authorization from our manager." After more waiting and paperwork, I was finally led into a small private room with a table in the center. Rachel and the bank manager brought in a long, rectangular metal box. "We'll give you privacy, Mrs. Thornfield," the manager said. "Take all the time you need." When they left, I sat staring at the box for several minutes before finally gathering the courage to open it. Inside were several folders, a small jewelry box, and an envelope with my name written on it in Montgomery's familiar handwriting. With trembling fingers, I opened the envelope first. "My dearest Beverly, if you're reading this, I'm no longer with you, and you've discovered my secret. For this, I am deeply sorry. What you find in this box will come as a shock, and I can only hope that you'll find it in your heart to forgive me. Before I met you, I was briefly married to a woman named Margaret Taylor. It lasted less than a year before we realized our mistake and divorced. I never told you about this because I was ashamed of my failure and afraid you might see me differently. As the years passed, it seemed less and less important to mention. What I didn't know when I left Margaret was that she was pregnant with my child. She didn't tell me, perhaps out of anger, perhaps thinking it best for everyone. I only discovered this 20 years ago when our daughter, Bridget, found me. I've met with Bridget several times over the years. She's a wonderful woman with children of her own, your grandchildren, though they don't know about you. I've kept records of all of them in this box, along with a separate will that provides for Bridget and her family. I know this is an unforgivable deception. I should have told you the moment I learned about Bridget, but I was a coward. I feared losing you, losing the perfect life we'd built together. Instead of trusting in your love and compassion, I chose secrecy. The jewelry box contains a locket with pictures of Bridget and her children. The folders have all their information, should you wish to contact them. I love you more than words can say, Beverly. You have been the greatest joy of my life. I hope that someday you can forgive me for keeping this secret. Forever yours, Montgomery. The letter dropped from my fingers as I struggled to breathe. Montgomery had another daughter, a daughter he'd known about for 20 years, and never told me about, grandchildren I'd never met, a whole other family existing parallel to ours. The shock gave way to anger, then to a profound sense of betrayal. 49 years of marriage, and he'd kept this from me. He hadn't trusted me enough to share something so significant. How many times had he made excuses to disappear for a few hours? How many business meetings had actually been visits with his other daughter? I opened the small jewelry box with shaking hands. Inside was a golden locket, and when I clicked it open, I saw them. A woman in her 40s with Montgomery's eyes and smile, and 3 children ranging from teenagers to young adults. They all had something of him in their features. The folders contained birth certificates, school records, photographs, an entire documented history of a family I never knew existed. Montgomery had been thorough in his deception, keeping meticulous records of this other life he'd been living behind my back. As I sat there surrounded by evidence of my husband's betrayal, I thought of Penny and the watch she'd sold without a second thought. The watch that had led me here, to this devastating truth. In a strange way, her selfish act had revealed her father's secret. I gathered everything back into the box, unsure of what I would do with this information, or how I would ever make sense of it all. The drive home passed in a blur. I pulled into my driveway and sat in the car for a long time, staring at the house Montgomery and I had shared for over 4 decades. Had it all been a lie? Every moment, every memory, tainted by this massive deception? Finally, I went inside, carrying the safe deposit box and Montgomery's watch. I placed them on the dining room table and poured myself a glass of wine, something I rarely did in the middle of the day. But today was not an ordinary day. I spent hours going through the contents of the box more carefully. There were birthday cards from Bridget to Montgomery signed "Love, Your Daughter," photos of him at what appeared to be a graduation ceremony with his arm around Bridget, pictures of him holding babies that must have been his grandchildren, evidence of a whole life I knew nothing about. According to the documents, Bridget lived in Hartford, less than an hour away. All these years, Montgomery's other daughter had been living practically next door. The thought made me physically ill. As night fell, I finally picked up the phone and called Theodore in Oregon. When he answered, his voice was warm and concerned. "Mom, everything okay? You don't usually call this late." "Theodore," I began, then paused, unsure how to continue. "How do you tell your son that his father had a secret family? That he has a half-sister he never knew about?" "Mom, you're scaring me. I'm sorry, dear. I've had quite a shock today. I discovered something about your father." "What is it?" The worry in his voice was palpable. I took a deep breath and told him everything. Penny selling the watch, the hidden code, the safe deposit box, and the devastating contents I'd found inside. There was a long silence when I finished. Then, "That son of a bitch." I had never heard Theodore speak about his father that way. "Theodore." "No, Mom, don't defend him. He lied to all of us for decades. He had another family. How could he do that to you? To us?" His anger was oddly comforting. It validated my own feelings of betrayal and rage. "What are you going to do?" he asked finally. "Are you going to contact this Bridget person?" It was a question I had been asking myself all afternoon. I don't know. Part of me wants to pretend I never found out, but another part wants answers. Theodore finished for me. "I understand. But whatever you decide, I'm here for you. Do you want me to come out there? I can get on a plane tomorrow." The offer brought tears to my eyes. "No, sweetheart. Stay with Emma and the kids. I need some time to process this on my own first." After we hung up, I sat in the growing darkness of my living room, surrounded by ghosts. Not just Montgomery's, but the ghosts of the life I thought I had lived, the marriage I thought I had been in. The next morning, I woke up with a clear sense of purpose. I needed answers, and there was only one person who could give them to me. I called Penny early, knowing she wouldn't be happy about it. She answered groggily, "Mom, it's not even 8 yet. What's going on?" "I need to see you today, Penelope. It's important." She sighed dramatically. "Is this about the watch?" "I told you I'm sorry, but I really needed—" "It's not just about the watch," I interrupted, "though I did get it back." "You did? How?" "I'll explain when I see you. Can you come to the house for lunch?" Another sigh. "Fine. Noon. Noon is perfect. This time, I didn't bother preparing her favorite chicken salad. Instead, I made simple sandwiches and put out the contents of the safe deposit box on the dining room table, including Montgomery's letter and the photographs of Bridget and her children. Penny arrived precisely at noon, looking far less polished than usual in jeans and a simple blouse, her hair pulled back in a ponytail. She seemed almost sheepish as she entered. "Hi, Mom. Look, before you say anything, I want to apologize for taking Dad's watch. It was wrong, and I'm sorry." The apology surprised me, but I simply nodded. "Thank you for acknowledging that. But as I said, this isn't just about the watch anymore." I led her to the dining room, where the evidence of her father's double life was laid out. Her eyes widened as she took in the photographs and documents. "What is all this?" I handed her Montgomery's letter. "Read this." She sat down and began reading, her expression changing from confusion to shock to disbelief. When she finished, she looked up at me with wide eyes. "My dad had another daughter, and he never told us." I nodded, sitting across from her. "Apparently so. For 20 years, he knew about her and kept it secret from all of us. But how did you find out about this?" I explained about the code in the watch and the safe deposit box. "Ironically, if you hadn't sold the watch, I might never have discovered any of this." Penny picked up one of the photographs, a recent one of Bridget with her 3 children. "They look like him," she said softly. "Especially the oldest boy. He has Dad's chin." "Yes," I agreed. "They do." She set the photo down carefully. "So what now? Are you going to contact her? This Bridget person?" It was the same question Theodore had asked, and I still didn't have a clear answer. "I'm considering it, but I wanted to talk to you and your brother first." "Does Theo know?" "I told him last night." Penny was silent for a moment, tracing the edge of Montgomery's letter with her finger. "You know what's crazy? I'm not even that surprised. Dad was always so compartmentalized. He kept parts of himself separate. I used to think it was just how men of his generation were, but maybe it was more than that." Her insight startled me. Had my daughter seen something in her father that I had missed? Had I been so blinded by love and routine that I hadn't noticed the signs? "There were times," Penny continued, "when he would get these phone calls and leave the room to talk. Or he'd be really insistent about going to certain events alone. I always just thought he was being private. But now it seems like he was hiding something." I finished for her. "Yes, I've been thinking the same thing." Penny looked at me with an expression I hadn't seen from her in years, one of genuine concern. "Are you okay, Mom? This must be devastating for you." The question unlocked something in me, and to my surprise, I felt tears well up. "I don't know if I'm okay. I feel like my entire marriage was based on a lie, like I didn't really know the man I loved for almost 50 years. Penny reached across the table and took my hand. "I'm so sorry, Mom. And I'm sorry about the watch. If I hadn't been so selfish." "No," I said firmly. "Don't apologize for that. Not anymore. If you hadn't sold the watch, I would have lived the rest of my life never knowing the truth. In a strange way, you did me a favor." She squeezed my hand. "So what are you going to do?" I took a deep breath. "I think I need to meet her. Bridget, I need to know what kind of relationship she had with your father, what he told her about us. If anything." Penny nodded slowly. "Well, I think that's the right decision. And Mom, I want to come with you when you do." It took me 3 days to work up the courage to call the number listed for Bridget in Montgomery's records. During that time, I spoke with Theodore daily. He wanted to fly back east for the meeting, but his wife was expecting their 3rd child any day now, and I insisted he stay. Penny, true to her word, remained by my side throughout. It was the most time we'd spent together in years, and despite the circumstances, there was something healing about it. She helped me sort through Montgomery's papers, stayed over in her old bedroom, and even cooked dinner, something she'd rarely done even when she lived at home. When I finally dialed Bridget's number, Penny sat beside me, holding my free hand. The phone rang 4 times before a woman answered. "Hello." The voice was so ordinary, so normal, that it threw me momentarily. What had I expected? That she would somehow sound like the other woman in a scandal. "Hello?" she repeated. "Who's calling, please?" I cleared my throat. "Is this Bridget Taylor?" "Yes, it is." "Who's this?" "My name is Beverly Thornfield. I was married to Montgomery Thornfield." There was a long silence on the other end. Then, very quietly, "I see. "How did you find me, Mrs. Thornfield?" Her calm response suggested she wasn't surprised to hear from me, which only confirmed my suspicions that she'd known all about me while I'd known nothing about her. "Montgomery left information about you in a safe deposit box. I only discovered it recently." Another pause. "I'm very sorry for your loss. My father, Montgomery, spoke very highly of you." Father. The word hit me like a physical blow. Of course she called him father. That's what he was to her. But hearing it spoken aloud made it real in a way that even the photographs hadn't. "I would like to meet with you, if you're willing," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "There are things I would like to understand." "I understand," Bridget replied. "And I've often thought about meeting you as well. When would you like to get together?" We arranged to meet the following day at a neutral location, a quiet cafe halfway between our homes. When I hung up, I looked at Penny, who had heard the entire conversation. "She seems—" Penny searched for the right word. "Nice," I finished. "She seems nice, and that somehow makes it worse." The next day, Penny drove us to the cafe as I was too nervous to trust myself behind the wheel. We arrived early and chose a table in the back corner for privacy. I was glad for Penny's presence. Her hand on my arm kept me grounded as we waited. At exactly 2 p.m. a woman entered the cafe. Even if I hadn't seen her photographs, I would have known it was Bridget immediately. She had Montgomery's height and bearing, his way of scanning a room, and when her eyes found mine, I saw his gaze looking back at me. She approached our table slowly, a tentative smile on her face. She was dressed conservatively in a navy blue dress, her dark hair streaked with the same gray that had started appearing in Montgomery's hair in his 50s. "Mrs. Thornfield." "I'm Bridget Taylor." She extended her hand, which I shook automatically. "And you must be Penelope. You look so much like your father." Penny nodded stiffly, shaking Bridget's hand as well. "Please, sit down." Bridget took the chair across from us. Up close, the resemblance to Montgomery was even more pronounced. It was like looking at a female version of my late husband, and it was deeply unsettling. "I want to start by saying how sorry I am for your loss," Bridget began. "Montgomery was a good man, and I know he loved you very much." The statement, delivered with such apparent sincerity, sparked a flash of anger in me. Did he? Because good men who love their wives don't typically keep secret families for decades. Bridget flinched slightly, but nodded. "You have every right to be angry. What he did, what we did, wasn't fair to you." "What you did?" I repeated. "So you knew about me, about Theodore and Penelope?" "Yes," she admitted. "From the beginning. When I first found Montgomery 20 years ago, he made it clear that he had a family, a wife he loved deeply, and that he wouldn't, leave you." "How generous of him," Penny muttered beside me. Bridget looked down at her hands. "I didn't come looking for him to disrupt his life or yours, Mrs. Thornfield. I just wanted to know where I came from. My mother died when I was 35, and only then did I learn from her sister that Montgomery was my biological father. I had grown up believing my stepfather was my real dad. I felt a twinge of sympathy despite myself. "So you didn't know about Montgomery until you were an adult?" She shook her head. "No, my mother never told me. I think she was trying to protect everyone. Me, her new husband, Montgomery, even you. When I found out, I debated for months whether to contact him at all. But I had children of my own by then, and I thought they deserved to know their heritage. I tried to imagine what it must have been like for her, discovering in her 30s that the man she thought was her father wasn't, that her real father had another family, another life entirely. What was your relationship with Montgomery like? How often did you see him?" These were the questions that had been tormenting me since I found the safe deposit box. Bridget sipped her water before answering. "We met about twice a year, usually for lunch or coffee. Sometimes with my children, sometimes just the two of us. He always insisted on meeting away from both our homes, to ensure I wouldn't find out," I said flatly. She didn't deny it. "Yes, he was very clear about wanting to keep our connection private. He said it would devastate you to learn about me after so many years of marriage." "Did he ever talk about telling me the truth?" I asked, hearing the plea in my own voice. I needed to know if Montgomery had ever considered honesty. Bridget hesitated. "He mentioned a few times that he thought about it, especially after his heart attack scare 5 years ago. But he always decided against it. He said you'd been through enough in your life, losing your parents so young, and he couldn't bear to cause you more pain. So he lied to protect me," I said bitterly. How convenient. I'm not defending him, Bridget said quickly. What he did was wrong. I knew it was wrong to be complicit in his deception, but she trailed off, looking genuinely conflicted. But he was your father, and you wanted a relationship with him, Penny finished for her, showing a surprising empathy. Bridget nodded. Yes, and now I'm afraid I've lost any chance of having a relationship with the rest of my family. You, Theodore, his children, my half-siblings and nieces and nephews. The statement caught me off guard. I hadn't thought about the future, about what this revelation would mean for our families moving forward. I'd been so caught up in the past betrayal that I hadn't considered that Bridget might want an ongoing connection. I understand, if you never want to see me again after today, Bridget continued. I've brought pain into your life, and I'm deeply sorry for that. But I want you to know that Montgomery spoke of you with nothing but love and admiration. He was proud of the family you built together. I found myself searching her face for signs of deceit or manipulation, but all I saw was sincerity and a sadness that mirrored my own. This woman had been as much a victim of Montgomery's choices as I had been, albeit in a different way. I need time, I said finally. This is all still very fresh and painful for me. Of course, Bridget said quickly. I didn't expect anything more. Thank you for being willing to meet with me at all. As we prepared to leave, Bridget reached into her purse and pulled out an envelope. I brought these for you. They're pictures of my children, your grandchildren, if you ever want to think of them that way. No pressure at all, but if you ever want to meet them, they know about you now. I told them after Montgomery passed. I accepted the envelope wordlessly, unsure how I felt about these strangers who shared my late husband's blood, who were connected to me through bonds I'd never chosen. As we parted, Bridget touched my arm lightly. Mrs. Thornfield, Beverly, I want you to know that your husband loved you deeply. That was never a lie. Whatever else he kept from you, his love for you was real. I saw it every time he spoke about you. The drive home was silent, both Penny and I lost in our own thoughts. Only when we were back in my kitchen, making tea as if performing this mundane task could somehow restore normality, did Penny speak. What do you think, Mom? About Bridget? I considered the question carefully. I think she's telling the truth. About all of it. And I think she's been caught in the middle of your father's deception, just as we have been. Penny nodded slowly. I thought so too. And her children. They're what? Our half-nieces and nephews. Your step-grandchildren. I suppose so, I said, the relationship still too confusing and painful to fully contemplate. Are you going to tell Theodore about the meeting? Of course. And he'll have to make his own decision about whether he wants to meet Bridget and her family. Penny leaned against the counter, looking thoughtful. You know what's strange? I'm furious with Dad for lying all these years, but I can't bring myself to hate Bridget. She seems genuine. I nodded, surprising myself with my next words. I might want to meet her again. Not right away, but someday. There are still questions I have. Things only she would know about your father's other life. I'll come with you, Penny said immediately. Whenever you're ready. As I looked at my daughter, I realized something had shifted between us. The theft of the watch, which had seemed so monumental just days ago, now appeared trivial in light of Montgomery's decades-long deception. And in dealing with this shared betrayal, Penny and I had found a new understanding, a new closeness. Perhaps that was the first silver lining in this dark cloud that had settled over my life. The rekindling of a relationship I had feared was irreparably damaged. 3 weeks passed. Spring fully arrived in Connecticut, bringing with it an explosion of color and life that seemed at odds with the emotional turmoil I was experiencing. I spent most days in a strange limbo, alternating between rage at Montgomery, grief for the marriage I thought I had, and a growing curiosity about Bridget and her family. Theodore called every day, sometimes multiple times. He was angry, angrier than I'd ever seen him, at his father's betrayal. But he was also interested in Bridget, asking questions about her, about the meeting, about what she had told me of her relationship with Montgomery. I think I want to meet her, he said during one of our calls. After the baby comes and things settle down. Emma thinks I should. What do you want? I asked, determined not to influence his decision. I want to understand, he said after a moment's reflection. I want to know this other piece of Dad, this whole part of his life he kept hidden, and I want my kids to know they're, what would they be? Cousins, half-cousins, whatever they are. Family is family. His words stayed with me. echoing in my mind as I went about my daily routines. Family is family. Was it really that simple? Could I eventually come to see Bridget and her children as extensions of my family, rather than evidence of my husband's betrayal? One afternoon, I was sorting through some of Montgomery's old papers when I came across a photo album I hadn't looked at in years. It contained pictures from the early years of our marriage, Montgomery and me on our honeymoon, buying our first house, holding newborn Theodore. As I turned the pages, I was struck by the genuine joy on Montgomery's face in every photograph. The way he looked at me, the way he held our children, the life we had built together. None of it seemed fake or forced. Whatever secrets he had kept, whatever compartments he had created in his life, his love for us had been real. Bridget had been right about that, at least. The realization didn't excuse his deception, but it did provide a small measure of comfort. The life we'd shared hadn't been a complete lie, just incomplete. That evening, I called Penny. "I'm thinking of contacting Bridget again," I said without preamble. "Would you be willing to come with me?" "Of course," she replied immediately. "When?" "I was thinking this weekend, if she's available. I want to ask her some more questions, and I'd like to see pictures of her children, the ones she gave me. I haven't been able to look at them yet. Do you want me to be there when you do? I could come over tonight." The offer touched me deeply. Yes, I think I would like that. Penny arrived an hour later with a bottle of wine and takeout from my favorite Italian restaurant. We sat at the dining room table, and I brought out the envelope Bridget had given me, still sealed. "Ready?" Penny asked gently. I nodded and opened the envelope. Inside were about a dozen photographs, each labeled on the back with names and dates. Bridget's children, James, 34, Catherine, 32, and Michael, 28, smiled back at us from various life events. Graduations, weddings, family gatherings. They look like thornfields," Penny said softly, pointing to James, whose resemblance to Montgomery was particularly strong. "That's definitely Dad's smile." We went through each photo, studying the faces of these strangers who were, by blood at least, our family. Catherine had 2 children of her own, making them Montgomery's great-grandchildren, a relationship he had known about but never shared with us. "It's strange," I said, holding a photo of Bridget with her 3 children at what appeared to be Michael's college graduation. "I feel angry looking at these, but also curious, like I want to know them." Penny sipped her wine thoughtfully. "I think that's normal, Mom. They're part of Dad, which makes them part of us in a way. It's okay to be curious about them while still being angry at Dad for keeping them secret." The next day, I called Bridget and asked if we could meet again. She sounded surprised but pleased, and we arranged to meet that Saturday at her home, a step of openness I hadn't expected from either of us. Penny drove us to Hartford again, this time to a modest colonial house in a quiet neighborhood. Bridget greeted us at the door with a nervous smile. "Thank you for coming," she said, leading us into a living room that was warm and inviting. "Can I get you anything? Coffee? Tea? Coffee would be nice," I said, taking in the family photographs that adorned her walls and shelves. Many featured her children at various ages, but my eyes were drawn to one on the mantel, Montgomery holding a baby, his expression one of unmistakable pride and joy. Bridget followed my gaze. "That's him with Catherine when she was about 6 months old." It was the second time we met. I walked over to examine the photo more closely. Montgomery looked slightly younger than I remembered him from that time, with fewer gray hairs and fewer lines around his eyes. This would have been around 20 years ago, when we were celebrating our 30th wedding anniversary. The thought sent a fresh wave of pain through me. "I have more pictures of him with the kids, if you'd like to see them," Bridget offered, returning with a tray of coffee and cookies. "I would," I said, surprising myself. "And I'd like to hear more about your relationship with him, not the logistics this time, but what he was like with you, with your children." Bridget nodded and brought out a photo album specifically dedicated to Montgomery's visits. As she turned the pages, she shared stories. How Montgomery had advised James on his college applications, how he'd attended Catherine's piano recitals when he could, how he'd taken Michael fishing on his 16th birthday. He tried to be present when it mattered, Bridget explained, and though he was always careful about his schedule, always worried about raising suspicions. "Did he ever talk about us?" Penny asked, her voice smaller than usual. "About me and Theodore?" Bridget smiled gently. "All the time. He was so proud of both of you. He kept every article Theodore published. And he loved showing me pictures of your art exhibitions. Penelope, the revelation that Montgomery had shared our achievements with his other daughter, was both comforting and disturbing. On one hand, it suggested he had truly valued and celebrated our accomplishments. On the other, it meant he had been actively maintaining these parallel relationships for years, carefully managing the flow of information between his two families. "Why did you agree to keep the secret?" I asked, the question that had been burning in my mind since our first meeting. "Didn't you think I had a right to know?" Bridget sighed deeply. "I've asked myself that same question many times over the years. When I first found Montgomery, I was just happy to know my biological father at all. I was willing to accept his terms. As time went on and our relationship deepened, I did suggest he tell you, several times actually, but he was adamant that it would destroy you, destroy your marriage." She looked at me directly. "I was wrong to go along with it. I can see that now. But he was the only father I had left, and I was afraid of losing him if I pushed too hard." Her honesty was disarming. I could see the genuine regret in her eyes, the complexity of her position. She had been caught between her desire for a father and the knowledge that their relationship was built on deception. "I understand," I said, and was surprised to find that I meant it. "And I don't know what I would have done in your position." As the afternoon progressed, something unexpected happened. Amid the pain and awkwardness, moments of genuine connection emerged. Bridget shared stories of her children that made us laugh. Penny discovered that she and Catherine shared a passion for abstract painting. I found myself genuinely interested in James's work as an environmental scientist. When it was time to leave, Bridget walked us to the door. "This meant a lot to me," she said. "More than I can express. I know it doesn't erase what happened, but I hope it's a start." I considered her words carefully before responding. "I can't promise what the future holds, Bridget. This is still very painful for me, but I'm glad we met again. It's helped me understand a bit better." "That's all I can ask for," she said. "And Beverly, for what it's worth, I believe Montgomery truly did love you with all his heart. That part was never a lie." Summer arrived with unseasonable heat and humidity. Theodore's wife gave birth to a healthy baby boy they named Daniel Montgomery Thornfield, a gesture that surprised me, given Theodore's anger at his father's deception. When I asked him about it, he said simply, "Dad made terrible mistakes, but he was still my father. I want to remember the good parts of him." Theodore and his family planned to visit in August, and he had expressed interest in meeting Bridget during their stay. The prospect of having all of Montgomery's children together for the first time was both daunting and strangely appealing. My relationship with Penny had continued to improve. She called regularly, visited on weekends, and had even started helping me organize Montgomery's affairs, a task I had been avoiding since his death. The watch that had started this entire journey was back in my jewelry box, though I now viewed it differently. It was no longer just a memento of my husband, but a key that had unlocked a hidden part of his life. One Saturday in July, while Penny and I were sorting through Montgomery's old files, she came across a folder labeled B.T. Trust. "Mom, look at this," she said, opening the folder to reveal financial documents. "It looks like Dad set up a trust for Bridget and her kids. There are regular payments going back almost 20 years. I examined the statements. Montgomery had indeed established a substantial trust fund, making quarterly deposits from an account I'd never known existed. The amounts weren't extravagant, but they were significant, enough to help with college tuitions, down payments on houses, emergencies. He was supporting them financially all these years," I said, unsure how to feel about this discovery. On one hand, it seemed like the responsible thing to do for his biological daughter and grandchildren. On the other, it represented yet another deception, another secret cache of money and resources. "There's something else," Penny said, pulling out a separate document from the folder. "It looks like he set up a trust for us too. You, me, and Theodore. It's actually larger than Bridget's." The document confirmed it. A family trust I had known nothing about, with clear instructions on how the assets were to be distributed upon Montgomery's death. Beside it was a letter addressed to me, sealed and never sent. With trembling hands, I opened it. "My dearest Beverly, if you're reading this, you've discovered the trusts I established for our family and for Bridget and her children. I know this will come as a shock, as will the existence of Bridget herself if you haven't already learned about her. I have no right to ask for your forgiveness. What I did, keeping Bridget a secret from you, maintaining these separate lives, was unforgivable. I told myself I was protecting you from pain, but the truth is, I was protecting myself from the consequences of my actions. I loved you completely, Beverly. That was never a lie. Our life together, our children, our home, those were the center of my world. Bridget and her family were a responsibility I took seriously, but you were always my heart. I've left instructions with my lawyer to reveal everything to you upon my death, but I suspect my courage will fail me even in this final act. If you found this letter another way, know that I intended for you to learn the truth, even if I couldn't bring myself to tell you face to face. The trust for you, Theodore, and Penelope is substantial, enough to ensure your comfort for the rest of your lives. Bridget's trust is smaller but sufficient to acknowledge my responsibility to her and her children. I hope someday you can find it in your heart to understand, if not forgive, and I hope that perhaps you might even come to know Bridget. She is a remarkable woman, and knowing her has been one of the unexpected joys of my life, albeit one tainted by the deception it required. I have loved you since the moment we met, and I will love you until my last breath and beyond. Forever yours, Montgomery. I set the letter down, tears streaming down my face. Penny, who had been reading over my shoulder, put her arms around me. He was going to tell you, she said softly. Maybe not in life, but he arranged for you to find out after he was gone. But he didn't follow through, I said, wiping my eyes. The lawyer never contacted me. I only found out because you sold his watch. Penny looked stricken. I'm so sorry about that, Mom. I was so selfish. I squeezed her hand. No, don't apologize. Not anymore. In a strange way, your act of selfishness led to the truth, and I needed to know the truth, painful as it is. Later that evening, after Penny had gone home, I sat on the patio with a glass of wine, watching the sunset and thinking about Montgomery's letter. The trust he had established for our family was indeed substantial, nearly $2 million that I hadn't known existed. We had always lived comfortably but not extravagantly. Where had all this money come from? The next day, I made an appointment with Montgomery's longtime attorney, Harold Whitaker. He seemed nervous when I entered his office, as if he knew why I had come. Mrs. Thornfield, it's good to see you. How can I help today? I placed Montgomery's letter on his desk. I found this among my husband's papers. It references trusts he established and instructions he left with you to reveal certain information after his death. Yet it's been 3 years, and you've never mentioned any of this to me. Harold's face flushed. I can explain, Mrs. Thornfield. Montgomery did indeed leave such instructions, but shortly before his death, he countermanded them. He asked me to keep everything confidential unless you discovered it on your own. I see, I said, feeling a fresh wave of disappointment. Even in his final days, Montgomery had chosen secrecy over honesty. And the money? Nearly $2 million in a family trust I knew nothing about. Where did it come from? Harold looked distinctly uncomfortable. Montgomery was more financially astute than perhaps you realized, Mrs. Thornfield. He made several extremely successful investments early in his career and chose to keep those assets separate from your joint finances. He was quite conservative with your everyday living expenses to ensure this nest egg continued to grow. I thought about our modest lifestyle, the careful budgeting, the occasional denied requests for home renovations or luxury vacations, all while Montgomery had been sitting on a fortune and using some of it to support his secret family. Thank you for your honesty, Mr. Whitaker, I said, rising to leave. I'd like all the documentation for these trusts sent to my home, please, and I'd appreciate it if you would contact me directly regarding any other secrets my husband might have left behind. As I drove home, I wrestled with my conflicting emotions. The financial deception added another layer to Montgomery's betrayal, yet in a practical sense, he had provided generously for both his families. He had ensured my financial security even as he maintained his secret life. When I arrived home, I found Bridget standing on my porch, looking nervous. I hadn't expected to see her, and for a moment, I considered turning around and driving away. But something compelled me to face this latest development head-on. Bridget, I said as I approached. This is a surprise. I'm sorry for showing up unannounced, she said quickly. I tried calling, but there was no answer. I can come back another time if this isn't good. No, it's fine, I said, unlocking the door. Please, come in. Once we were seated in the living room, Bridget explained her unexpected visit. I received a letter from Montgomery's lawyer yesterday. He said you'd discovered the trusts and that I should expect to hear from you soon. I thought it might be better if we talked in person. The epilogue. 5 years have passed since that fateful day when I discovered Montgomery's watch was missing. 5 years since a simple phone call to a pawnshop unraveled the carefully constructed facade of my marriage, revealing secrets I never could have imagined. 5 years of pain, healing, revelations, and ultimately, an unexpected kind of peace. Today, I sit on the back porch of my new home, a smaller, single-story house with a garden that's much easier to maintain at my age. It's a warm September afternoon, and the yard is filled with activity. Theodore's 3 children are playing tag around the old oak tree, their laughter carrying on the breeze. Penny is arranging flowers on the large picnic table, while her new husband, Eric, tends to the grill. And on the far side of the yard, Bridget's son James is showing his young daughter how to use a butterfly net, his patience and gentle instruction reminiscent of Montgomery in ways that still catch me off guard sometimes. Yes, Bridget and her family are here for our annual end-of-summer gathering, a tradition that began, tentatively and awkwardly, 3 years ago, and has since evolved into something I look forward to with genuine pleasure. The path to this moment wasn't easy. After discovering the trusts Montgomery had established, I spent months alternating between rage and despair. How could the man I'd shared my life with for nearly 50 years have maintained such elaborate deceptions? The financial secret was almost as painful as the hidden daughter. All those years of careful budgeting, of denying ourselves certain luxuries. While Montgomery sat on a small fortune he was using partly to support his other family. I confronted Bridget about the money, of course. That day on my porch when she arrived unexpectedly became a turning point for us. She was as shocked as I was about the extent of the trust funds. She knew Montgomery had helped with her children's education and occasional emergencies, but she had no idea about the systematic financial support or the substantial inheritance he'd arranged. I never wanted his money, she told me, her eyes filling with tears. I just wanted to know my father, to have some connection to where I came from. I believed her. Something in her straightforward manner, her willingness to face my anger and pain without excuses, convinced me that she had never been motivated by financial gain. That conversation marked the beginning of a slow, cautious relationship between us. Not friendship, exactly, but a kind of alliance formed in the wreckage of Montgomery's deceptions. We were both victims of his compartmentalized life, both trying to reconcile the man we had known with the elaborate web of secrets he had maintained. Theodore met Bridget for the first time during his visit that August. I had worried about that meeting. Theodore had been the most vocal about his anger toward Montgomery, but to my surprise, he and Bridget connected almost immediately. They shared not only physical traits inherited from their father, but a similar analytical mind and dry sense of humor. By the end of the visit, Theodore had invited Bridget and her family to Oregon to meet his wife and children. Penny's journey to acceptance was more complicated. Initially supportive of my relationship with Bridget, she went through a period of resentment as our connection deepened. "It feels like she's taking my place," Penny confessed during a difficult conversation. "Like she's becoming the daughter you always wanted instead of the one you got." Her words hurt, but they also helped me recognize that I needed to heal my relationship with my daughter as I was building one with Bridget. The watch incident had been forgiven, but not forgotten, and there were deeper issues between us that predated Montgomery's betrayal. We started seeing a family therapist together, just Penny and me. Those sessions were painful but necessary, exposing patterns of communication and expectation that had damaged our relationship for years. Slowly, we rebuilt our connection on a healthier foundation. Today, Penny calls me almost daily, shares her triumphs and struggles openly, and has become my most steadfast support. The financial revelations brought practical changes as well. I used part of the trust money to downsize to this more manageable home, invested a portion for security, and, in a decision that felt both radical and right, established a charitable foundation focused on supporting single parents and their children. The Montgomery Thornfield Foundation now provides scholarships, housing assistance, and mentoring programs across Connecticut. It feels like transforming Montgomery's deception into something genuinely good. As for the watch that started it all, I gave it to Theodore last Christmas. He was reluctant to accept it at first, given its complicated history, but I insisted. "This watch led me to the truth," I told him. "Morsa, as painful as that truth was, I'm grateful for it. I'd rather live with difficult truths than comforting lies." The watch now sits in a display case in Theodore's study, the hidden code still visible inside the caseback, a reminder of the secrets it once held, and the healing it ultimately facilitated. Bridget and I have developed a relationship I never could have imagined 5 years ago. Not quite mother and daughter, but something uniquely our own. We meet for lunch monthly, exchange birthday and holiday gifts, and share stories about Montgomery, filling in the gaps in each other's understanding of the complex man we both loved. Last year, when I was diagnosed with early-stage breast cancer, it was Bridget who drove me to chemotherapy sessions when Penny couldn't get away from work. It was Bridget's daughter, Catherine, who brought meals to my home during my recovery, and Bridget's grandchildren who sent hand-drawn cards that still decorate my refrigerator. They have become family in a way I never expected, not replacing the family I had, but expanding it, enriching it with new connections and perspectives. Grammy Beverly! A small voice breaks into my reverie, and I look down to see James's 5-year-old daughter, Lily, holding up a butterfly she's captured in her net. Look what I caught. It's beautiful, sweetheart, I say, admiring the delicate creature. What kind do you think it is? As Lily launches into an explanation of butterfly species that's impressive for her age, I catch Bridget watching us from across the yard, a soft smile on her face. Our eyes meet, and there's an understanding that passes between us, an acknowledgement of the strange, painful journey that brought us together and the unexpected peace we've both found. Later, as we all gather around the picnic table for dinner, I look at the faces surrounding me. Theodore and his wife Emma, their 3 children, Penny and Eric, Bridget and her husband Daniel, their children and grandchildren, Montgomery's complete legacy, together for the first time. Theodore raises his glass. I'd like to propose a toast, he says, his voice carrying across the suddenly quiet table. Unto family. The one we're born into, the one we choose, and the one we discover along the way. To family, everyone echoes, glasses clinking. As I sip my wine, I reflect on the strange path that brought us here. If Penny hadn't sold the watch, if I hadn't called the pawn shop, if the buyer hadn't discovered the hidden code, how different my life would be now. I would have lived out my remaining years believing in a marriage that wasn't what I thought, never knowing about Bridget and her children, never understanding the full measure of the man I had married. Would that have been better? To die believing in a beautiful lie rather than living with a complicated truth? No. Despite the pain, despite the betrayal, I'm grateful for the truth. It has given me a larger family, a deeper understanding of Montgomery, flawed as he was, and most importantly, it has given me a chance to redefine myself, not just as Montgomery's widow, but as Beverly Thornfield, a woman of strength and resilience, who could face devastating truths and build something new from them. As the evening winds down and the younger children begin to doze in their parents' arms, Bridget sits beside me on the porch swing. Are you doing okay? She asks softly. These gatherings must still be bittersweet for you. I consider her question carefully. They are, I admit. There's still a part of me that wishes your father had been brave enough to bring us together while he was alive, that he could see this, all of his family together, finding a way forward. Bridget nods, her eyes reflecting the same complicated emotions I feel. Do you think you would have ever forgiven him if he had told you about me while he was still alive? It's a question I've asked myself many times over the years. I'd like to think I would have, I say slowly. Not immediately, perhaps not for a long time, but eventually, yes. I think forgiveness would have come. After all, I found a way to forgive him now, when he can't benefit from it or make amends. And me? Bridget asks, her voice smaller. Have you forgiven me for my part in the deception? I take her hand. This woman who is both a reminder of my husband's betrayal and a gift he unknowingly left behind. There was never much to forgive with you, Bridget. You were caught in an impossible situation. But yes, any resentment I felt toward you is long gone. She squeezes my hand, and we sit in comfortable silence, watching as Theodore helps his youngest son catch fireflies in the gathering dusk. He would be proud of this, Bridget says finally, of all of us, finding a way to be family despite everything. Yes, I agree. I think he would be. Though I also think he should have trusted us enough to believe we could do it while he was still alive. As twilight deepens into evening and the various family members begin gathering their belongings and children to head home, I feel a profound sense of gratitude wash over me. Not for Montgomery's deception, I will never be grateful for that, but for my own resilience, for my children's capacity for forgiveness, and for the unexpected family bonds that have grown from the ashes of betrayal. When Montgomery died, I thought my family was complete. A widow, 2 adult children, several grandchildren. I had no idea that hidden in a safe deposit box, guarded by a secret code inside a watch, was a whole other branch of my family tree waiting to be discovered. At 79 years old, I've learned that family is more complex, more resilient, and more expansive than I ever imagined. It can survive terrible betrayals, extend beyond blood ties, and rebuild itself in new and unexpected formations. My life didn't end with Montgomery's secrets. In many ways, it expanded, becoming richer and more authentic than the carefully curated version I had lived for so many years. As I wave goodbye to the last departing car, I think about the watch that started it all. How fitting that a timepiece, an object designed to measure the passing of hours and days, would be the key to unlocking a past long hidden and opening the door to a future I never could have imagined. Time heals, they say, but what they don't tell you is that sometimes time also reveals. And in that revelation, painful as it may be, lies the possibility of a different kind of healing, a deeper understanding, and a new beginning, even at 79 years old.